Welcome to O-Level Oasis, your companion for mastering O-Level Biology 5090 with confidence. Before we begin, I'd like to sincerely thank you all for your patience while waiting for my videos, and I truly appreciate your understanding regarding the delays. I also want to apologize for the wait. That said, I want to assure you of one thing: I always take the time to create high-quality content, and that's something I will never compromise on. So far, we've successfully covered 16 chapters, and we're almost at the finish line, just 3 more to go, which we'll be completing very soon. Stay tuned, and thank you again for sticking with me. I promise that everything we're doing here is to help you improve and succeed. Now, for today's lesson, we'll be working on past paper questions from Chapter 16, Development of Organisms and Continuity of Life. In this chapter, we explored the basics of nuclear division, how new cells are formed, and how life begins at the cellular level. We also looked at different methods of reproduction, both asexual and sexual, leading up to human reproduction and how life ultimately begins. Today, we'll take all those concepts and apply them to past paper questions to strengthen your understanding and exam skills. Let's get started. We begin with the first question from Paper 2, which says, Figure 1.1 shows the female human reproductive system as viewed from the front, with labeled diagrams A, B, C, D, and E. The first part of this question asks us to identify the letter on Figure 1.1 that has been used to label the area where each of the following happens, followed by, where sperm is deposited, where estrogen is produced, and where implantation occurs. In simple words, this question is asking us to carefully look at a diagram of the female reproductive system and match each function with the correct labeled part. We are given the names of the parts as A, B, C, D, and E, and we need to know what each label represents. So the task here is to connect each biological function with the correct organ and then write the corresponding letter from the diagram. Now, from the diagram, A represents the uterus, B represents the fallopian tubes or oviducts, C represents the ovary, D represents the cervix, and E represents the vagina. Using this information, we match each function step by step. The answer is the sperm is deposited is in vagina, which is marked E here. This means that during reproduction, sperm enters the female body through the vagina, so E is the correct label for this function. Next, estrogen is produced as the ovary, marked as C here. This shows that the ovary is responsible for producing the hormone estrogen, so the correct label here is C. Finally, the implantation occurs as the uterus, which is marked A here. This explains that after fertilization, the embryo attaches itself to the lining of the uterus, so A is the correct label for implantation. So, the sperm enters through the vagina, hormones like estrogen are produced in the ovary, and implantation takes place in the uterus. Moving on, in the next part it says, some women can have blockages in the tubes labeled B, and the question they ask is explain why this would prevent them becoming pregnant. In simple words, this is asking us to explain the role of these tubes and why a blockage in them stops pregnancy from happening. We already know that the tubes labeled B are the fallopian tubes, which are very important because they are the pathway where the sperm travels to meet the egg. In the human reproductive system, the egg is released from the ovary and enters the fallopian tube. At the same time, sperm enters through the vagina, passes the cervix and uterus, and then travels up into the fallopian tube. So the fallopian tube is not just for the egg, it is the place where both the egg and sperm meet. So here, we need to explain what goes wrong when this pathway is blocked and how that affects fertilization. The answer we will write is, blockages in the tubes labeled B, which are fallopian tubes also called oviducts, would prevent pregnancy because sperm would not be able to reach and meet the egg. As a result, fertilization cannot occur, so no zygote is formed and pregnancy cannot happen. So, if the fallopian tubes are blocked, the sperm cannot travel through them to reach the egg. Since fertilization normally takes place in these tubes, the sperm and egg never meet. Because of this, fertilization does not occur, no zygote is formed, and without a zygote, pregnancy cannot take place. Next we move to part C, which says, in vitro fertilization, in short IVF, can be used to help women who have blocked tubes to get pregnant, and it involves several steps given here. The steps are listed as follows: the ovaries are stimulated to produce a large number of eggs, then, the eggs are removed from the ovaries before they are released naturally, then, the eggs are fertilized with sperm, and finally, the fertilized eggs are replaced into the uterus. In simple understanding, this question is describing the IVF process, where fertilization happens outside the body and then the embryo is placed back into the uterus. The first step focuses on stimulating the ovaries so that more eggs are produced than usual. So here, we need to identify which hormone is responsible for stimulating egg production and write its correct biological name. So, we will simply write here, a hormone that could be used is follicle stimulating hormone, in short FSH. So, follicle stimulating hormone, commonly known as FSH, is used in IVF to encourage the ovaries to develop and release multiple eggs at the same time. This increases the chances of successful fertilization because more eggs are available for collection and later fertilization. Then in the second part, it is stated, in step 2, a drug is used to stop the action of luteinizing hormone, and the question asks, explain why it is important to stop the action of LH. In simple terms, this question is asking us to understand the role of luteinizing hormone in the body and why, during IVF treatment, its action needs to be blocked. LH is the hormone that triggers ovulation, meaning it causes the mature egg to be released from the ovary. However, in IVF, doctors need to collect the eggs before they are naturally released, so ovulation must be prevented. Therefore, we must explain why stopping LH is necessary for this process to work properly. The answer is, it is important to stop the action of luteinizing hormone LH because LH stimulates ovulation, which is the release of the egg. By preventing this, the eggs are not released from the ovaries, so they can be collected or removed for use in the procedure. This means that LH normally causes the egg to leave the ovary during ovulation, but in IVF this would be a problem because the egg would be lost into the oviduct. By blocking LH, ovulation does not occur, so the eggs remain in the ovaries where they can be safely collected by doctors for fertilization in the laboratory. The question states that when a man and a woman are unable to have children, they are called an infertile couple, and it further informs us that there are an estimated 90 million infertile couples in the world. It then adds that 17% of infertility cases are due to blocked tubes in women, and finally asks us to calculate how many couples this represents and to give the answer in standard form. In simple terms, this question is asking us to find 17% of the total 90 million couples, because only that fraction of the total infertile couples are affected by blocked tubes. After finding the numerical value, we must convert the final answer into standard form, which means writing it as a number between 1 and 10 multiplied by a power of 10. So, we begin by finding 17% of 90 million. We interpret percentages, per 100, so 17% is written as 17 out of 100, or 17 divided by 100. This is then multiplied by 90 million because that is the total number of infertile couples. So the calculation becomes 17 divided by 100 times 90 million, which gives 15,300,000. Now we convert this into standard form. To do this, we simply shift the decimal point until only one non-zero digit is left in front of it. As we move the decimal point, we count how many places it moves. That count becomes the power of 10 in the final answer. If the decimal point is moved to the left, the power of 10 is written as a positive number. If the decimal point is moved to the right, like in this case, the power of 10 is written as a negative number. So 15,300,000 becomes 1.53 times 10 to the power of 7. Therefore, the final answer is 1.53 times 10 to the power of 7. This shows that out of the total infertile couples in the world, 17% due to blocked tubes corresponds to 15.3 million couples, and when written properly in scientific notation, it becomes 1.53 times 10 to the power of 7.